So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar organized by Hong Kong Life Sciences Society. So my name is Janice and I'll be the MC for today's event. And so to start off, I'd like to welcome today's speaker. We have Dr. Alastair Louey, who will be sharing his insights on the importance of visual communication in sciences and also how you can also be an effective science communicator. And so a brief introduction about Alastair. He's currently the managing director and co-founder of Reen Studios, a creative studio specializing in creating engaging visuals like hand-drawn animation, CGI, and virtual reality for brands like biopharmaceutical or life science companies. He holds a PhD in biochemistry from the University of Oxford, and he also has experience working in venture capital and private equity in the biopharmaceutical space. And so regarding the rundown of today's webinar, we'll start by learning a bit more about Reen Studios, on how it brings together science, technology, and creativity to help businesses become more vibrant and impactful. And then we'll move on to a chit chat section. And then finally, we'll end with a Q&A section where you can talk to Alastair and ask him further questions. And so without further ado, please welcome Alastair.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in so late in the evening, and also hopefully everyone is staying safe in this Typhoon 8. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank Hong Kong Life Science Society for inviting me as a guest speaker. Really honored. And today's topic is about the power of communication in science. In fact, communication as a skill shouldn't be limited to just science, but can be applied to whatever you decide to do next. Science is often viewed as complex and even sometimes dull, but that is a result of not making it accessible and easy to understand. I would like to share with you why I decided to go down this route for my career, what inspired me to start my own company to address something that people may think is a niche area in the science or tech world. I can also go through some case studies of our past clients and how we help them. Hopefully by the end of the talk, you can start to think about how you can communicate better as you progress through your university years or even your careers. Just to quickly introduce myself, even though Janice has kindly done so already, I graduated with a PhD in biochemistry from Oxford University around 4 years ago. Since then, I had experience as a business development consultant at LP Science, which is a Shanghai immuno-oncology company, assisting them with their fundraising, learn about the China biotech ecosystem, as well as networking with Chinese investors and also the startup scene as well. Then I decided that I wanted to learn about investment, and was fortunate enough to learn from the likes of Lily Asia Ventures and Lake Blur Capital. And during that time, I already had the inspiration to start Reen Studios. Also, being very fortunate to have great mentors, they really urged me to start it as well. So the inspiration really came when I was at LP Science, and also through my experience as an investor. So one of the first pain points and main pain points that I noticed at LP Science, as well as when companies and scientists were pitching to me, science is really complex and can, take a lot of time to explain. So for example, at LP Science, when we were pitching to investors, it took us 30 minutes to explain how the drug works, which is absolutely crazy since we only have 45 minutes to an hour for a pitch. So as a result for taking too long in a presentation or pitch, knowledge retention for target audiences, even specialist investors, was low. If you look at the bottom right picture here, it's funny because we know that scientists put so much effort in their research and innovation, and they like to include so much information in their decks. But at the end of the day, people either don't understand or they lose attention. Science, medicine, and even technology are very visual subjects and are hard to comprehend without some sort of visual aid. We as humans find it hard to grasp concepts when we can't see with our own eyes, right? So we also learn and remember things better when we combine sound and visuals together. So my goal is to help life science companies and also tech companies who are trying to share their innovations and technologies, provide affordable and high quality service for earlier stage companies when there are animation vendors out there that are charging $3,000 per second a video. So on average, around $1 million to $2 million for a video, which is absolutely crazy. I always think that wouldn't it be a shame if you spend this many years developing, innovating, and researching, but at the end of the day, no one understands what you're doing. It's like to this day, my parents still don't really understand what I studied for my PhD. But jokes aside, this is why I started Rent Studios, to make science more accessible. Now, there isn't really one single solution for effective communication, but as a scientist myself, when we work with clients at Rent Studios as well, I'm constantly trying to figure out what is the best way to get a message, story, or meaning across. The first key is to be concise. What does it mean to be concise? It means getting core information across in a short amount of time and in the most effective way. We use logic and structure to convey a story, formulate logical structures and arguments or discussions. The use of language is also essential for being concise. It's hard in science since we always have so many complex terms, but using simple language is something that is often overlooked in our industry. Because we think by using complex language, we may be perceived as more innovative, but in fact, it's actually counterproductive. We need to tailor the language to our target audiences. Are we talking to scientists? Are we talking to investors? Or are we talking to your grandmother? Time is money. Investors don't have a lot of time. And in general, people have lower attention spans. And so retaining attention is absolutely key. So a relevant case study you can see here at the bottom is a past client that we worked with called Ori Capital. And they're a fund that specializes in investing in biotech. And they have an proprietary AI database that allows them to extrapolate lots and lots of information, and including from publications, from KOL networks to CEO networks, and the science itself supposed to help them with their investment decisions. And when they're describing the database, it took them, I'm not going to lie, 3 hours to explain, which is absolutely crazy. They're also, fundraising at the moment around $300 million. And imagine them pitching to potential LPs and investors for 3 hours each, every single time. So we worked with their team to distill core information into just 3 minutes, using cool infographics, good flow of a story, and simple language. The second key is to be able to use different creative mediums and technologies like animation to make information visual. We normally remember or learn better with vivid and captivating imagery or videos in combination with sound, rather than via a dull PowerPoint presentation slide with so many texts. Also, imagine from a medical and scientific perspective, if you're able to visualize something that's normally that you can't with the naked eye, that is actually something extremely powerful if you can, right? Being concise is one thing, but it is also important not to over-dilute the science. That is a challenge that we constantly face. How can we combine the accessibility of information with scientific accuracy? We're constantly trying to find that perfect equilibrium. So for example, here with Transcenter, they're a cancer immuno-oncology company, antibody company. And, one of the things is that it's really hard to use words to describe spatial orientations, let alone structures of their cancer antibody drug. The client demanded scientific accuracy. At the same time, we can't be too complex for their audience because they're going through the IPOs and they have to tell the bankers how to sell them, right, throughout this process. So we asked them to, number one, provide their drug protein, structure to us. And also, we look through proteomic databases to look for specific structures, on the receptors of a tumor cell or the receptors of an NK cell, and actually code it and structure it into 3D animation. And, we also really work closely with their clinical team to find out specific spatial orientations of interactions between the antibody, the tumor cells, and the NK cells. And 3D animation really helps with this case because, not only can we show the interactions, we can also use vivid colors and captivating visuals to show how everything interacts at a molecular level. And so since then, Transcenter has used our video in their IPO roadshow, and also they IPO'd in 2021. And it's funny because I'm still in contact with their CEO, and he still tells me that he's like replaying this video in the labs and in the offices. So I'm not surprised that his employees are bored of the video already, but it's great to hear these stories. Similarly, we applied this to Eglogics, and they're a Hong Kong CU company that is specialized in IVF. They have a microfluidic chip technology and also a mitochondria transplantation technique that can mature immature eggs to increase fertilization success rates. So you can see here, not only do we need to show how the eggs are loaded into the chip, we have to also show the process of mitochondria transfer, which is really hard to show in a still image, you can imagine. And also, let alone text as well. So we're really focused on getting the visuals, getting the fluidity and the spatial orientation right. We also needed to create a 3D environment to match the brand. And what does that mean? Eglogics wanted the audience, which are patients, to feel that they are clinical, safe, and clean. So we use light colors, whites, pinks to create that vibe as well. The third key is to be a storyteller. Being a storyteller, you can pack in a lot of information in a very cool way. People like stories, and investors invest in a good story. Science or tech films don't have to be dry and boring. They can be vibrant, have a good analogy or metaphors or something people can relate to and have experienced before. And in the case of Arrive here, Arrive is an anti-money laundering regtech company based in Hong Kong as well. And they are also, they're only company that can detect Chinese character manipulation and cross-check with sanctions lists for banks, legal, and accounting firms. We've created a story in a perspective of a criminal because it's actually more controversial and exciting. How is she trying to manipulate her own Chinese name to escape the current system, to set up a bank account and evade sanctions? But we presented Arrive as a solution to counter this. So this was a really, really fun project to work on. And the ultimate goal, right, was to provoke Arrive's potential audience, so their investors and their potential clients, to think about the consequences if they keep using the same archaic system that they're using right now and not use Arrive's tech, then what will happen? We also worked with Huawei, and Huawei being a big client of ours, and it's very inspiration to work with them as well because they're trying to incubate their own companies. And in this case, we use film and animation to make this less about the technology, but more about the founders themselves. So making human stories can convey more emotion and get people to relate. We've generated more than 1.5 million views and shares just on Facebook alone, as well as, lots of views on LinkedIn and YouTube. And it was certainly interesting to show the stresses of the founder. That's why people love the Huawei stories. And as a founder myself and as a human being, nothing is perfect. And, we always go through difficult times. So these series of films was focused on the emotions and of course, showcase how Huawei has helped these founders throughout these difficult times. And, just to summarize, right, science can be cold from the outside, but actually there's so much passion and innovation, right, behind the science, behind our research, behind the technology itself. So let's be storytellers and actually make things interesting. The last key is to be inspirational. And it sounds vague and cliche, but honestly, I couldn't figure out what, other words to use. So through our work, with our clients, we always aim to prompt more interest and a sort of sense of what's next and the potential, right? It's like after every episode of a TV show, they always cut off at a scene or there's a teaser where you're like, okay, oh my God, what is next? And then we fall into a trap of binge watching the next episode to the next episode to the next episode. And I think that's sort of how we can learn to apply this when we're doing our presentations. Like after each slide or after each section, how can we regain people's attention and curiosity, right? And I think there's always prompts and sort of things that we can think about or questions that we can put at the end of the slide to sort of prompt the audience to think about what's next. The next thing is also music, design, sound effects, and also voiceover styles, or how you enunciate, or when you're doing your presentation, like how do you enunciate things? How do you make things more theatrical? And these things are often overlooked in our industry. So, if we can apply these sort of skill sets, I think they can be really extremely helpful to guide the audience through complex subjects and generate more interest. And it goes without saying, if you apply the 3 previous keys to be concise, visual, and be a storyteller, you can achieve this last key as well. Other than PowerPoint, there are various forms of effective visual comms in science. When we're working with clients, we don't just limit ourselves in terms of what forms of media we use. So for traditional formats, meaning what we can see with a conventional screen, TV, or projector, there are animation and film. There are many forms of animation, and we mainly work with both 2D and 3D. We also worked with, hand-drawn animation as well, which was really cool. So for 2D motion graphics, right, it's very simple and it's very easy to demonstrate and it's very quick to deliver. So, showing simple things, showing simple information, it's very easy to deliver in comparison to something like 3D animation, where 3D is something that we can show things with more precision. But the sort of the drawback with 3D is that it takes a lot of time and effort to deliver, and it requires high skill sets to do that. So animation is not just about art, but it's also about coding. It's about the lighting, the texturing, the rendering as well, which requires a lot of computing power. And a lot of these things require very special sort of skill sets to do. But I think it's really effective for science because in 3D, as I mentioned before, we can sort of show a lot of things in different spatial contexts. And I think it's something that is useful in science. Another thing is stylish, more stylistic animation, such as hand-drawn animation, where, it's very complicated as well, where the artist has to draw every single frame of the animation by hand. And, we apply this to not many projects because, it's very time consuming, but this was a really cool project that we worked on called Afterlife. And it's basically based on, it's a tennis ball recycling initiative. And, what was really difficult or really interesting as a concept is, we wanted to make recycling more interesting. We want to make it, less dull, like, oh, just put it in the recycling bin. So, we wanted to be a little bit more philosophical. And so when we're working with, the team at Afterlife, what they wanted to achieve was, we wanted to think about as a team, right? When we're playing sports or playing tennis, we often overlook or appreciate the balls that we use, right? We normally appreciate, the game itself, like when we win a game, when we win against a friend, or when we're watching a really great crowd, cheering after a really great point. We often overlook the fact that without the ball, there's no game, right? And so we wanted to encapsulate all the energy, the positive energy that you get from a match, or just playing with your friends or your family. And then if you leave it on the side of the court or you throw it in the bin, then this energy kind of dissipates and disappears. And so we wanted to use some sort of animation to showcase how we can pass this energy along and reuse this energy in, biofuels, or using it as rubber to put on roads to prevent slipperage, right, in Hong Kong, and recycle it. And so that was a really cool project that we worked on. And then, of course, the last thing is live action film. And as I mentioned before, right, with live action film, it can be more human, more emotions related to the character. Companies or even, labs are formed by teams. And it's important to not forget that. So these are all great formats to choose, but it's a matter of what you wanted to demonstrate. Then there are new formats, which are immersive and perhaps is the future of communication. So with augmented reality on the bottom left here, it's really the integration of digital information with the user's environment in real time. And so in this case, we actually did a project with Disney Shanghai, where they wanted to create an AI Christmas tree. And so, with this is very simple because, we're using very simple graphics and, Snapchat filters, that type of thing that can generate more sort of traction and attraction, right? And then so, that was cool, but, this tech can be applied to so many different things as well. And so there's this company that we're, currently collaborating with called Campfire AR, and they're based in California. And they're developing a headset that can encourage holographic collaboration. So more than one person in the room can manipulate a model, EV car design, or architectural design. And now we can apply this to med tech industries as well. So demonstrating robotics, genome sequencing companies that have huge workflows. We can even do training videos or sort of training aids for scientists working in industry as well. So in the middle, you see VR, and VR is another interesting medium. And, it's very interesting as well because unlike AR, it is completely immersive and you can be transported into another world or space. We can use this to our advantage in science because, as mentioned previously, most things in science are not visible to the naked eye. So imagine if we can be transported into the blood vessel, the heart, the brain, or even inside the cell. This whole immersive experience will capture your attention that a screen or iPhone can't. For VR, we're also potentially working with a laparoscopic robotic surgery company, and they're utilizing nuclear power plant arms and converting them into small precision robotics for surgery. The reason why we use nuclear power plant technology is because they're super sensitive and accurate, and also they have haptic feedback. And, there's no room for mistakes in nuclear power plants as there aren't in surgery. So this completely makes sense, and it's super impressive as a company that they're based in France as well. And they tell me that every time that they pitch to investors, they will have a live video feed of the surgery using the machine. This is seriously impressive, right? Because it's crazy. You're doing a live surgery in front of investors, and they were able to raise $40 million just like that in their first round. But it's really inconvenient and expensive to present like this. And so that's why they wanted us to come up with a solution in VR. And, we're thinking about it in two different angles. So one being, can we create a similar experience of watching a surgery, but we're free to move in and out, observe from infinite amount of angles. So zooming in super close to see it in action, zooming out to see what the surgeons are doing. And then the second thing that we're thinking about is, can we make it interactive? So can surgeons trial it like a game in VR? And that's obviously something a little bit more ambitious, but I think if we can apply these two, I think it'll be really, really effective. And so moving on to gamification as well, it's also trending. We can see companies like Achilles Digital Medicine, where they developed a game to help kids with ADHD. And also they've developed a game for COVID brain fog as well, and it's FDA approved. So their goals are to train the cognitive awareness and focus. And I think through interactivity, that's something that I feel like we can start to apply in future communications. And, it's super innovative method in capturing attention. The last sort of next gen, method I feel like is immersive projections. And there's something a step towards the future for conferences, because now that we have super high resolution projections and 360 screens, I think it's something that's really cool and we can apply and make it more immersive as an experience. So, previously we did a creative proposal for a Chinese biotech. Of course, we can't name the name because we signed an NDA. But, what they wanted to do is what they had was, they had a whole museum exhibition space within their within the building. And what they wanted to achieve with the space is they wanted to create some sort of, first person's perspective of like what, the users can achieve from using the technology. They wanted to achieve some sort of immersive experience where the user can be taken into a perspective of the cell and then seeing like, how the technology works in real time. And so that was something really cool. And, it's definitely a work in progress. So what is next for us, right? And what is next for Ren Studios and for myself and my team? So I think the major and primary goal for us is to find ways to scale as a business, right? And as a service company, we're always limited by the number of contracts that we can get in a year, right? But I think the ultimate goal is to help more companies. And how do we do that? So we partnered up with an accelerator called Tiger J Pebble. And we're, basically we're helping their portfolio companies and at the same time learn how to build companies from scratch for Hong Kong and also for Greater Bay Area. And I think this is something that, it's our goal and my goal to build up companies and educate companies, especially early stage companies, to, they need to start to learn how to communicate the technologies better, because, the earlier you learn, the more advantageous you can get as you go through your stages of, fund round, seed stage round, finance rounds and all of that. So I think it's really important to start early and to learn how to get more exposure for yourself. The second sort of major goal for Ren Studios is, we want to revolutionize education. And I think that's something that's very ambitious because, thinking about lectures as a format, it's still the same for the past 100 years. We're still learning through blackboards, whiteboards and projections and PowerPoints, PDFs, et cetera. And it hasn't been innovating for the past hundreds of years. And so can we apply VR? Can we apply AR or the strength of our content creation for schools and universities? And I think this is something that we want to try to explore, but it's definitely something more long term. And can we make lectures or school subjects and digitize them? I think that's something that I feel like it could be more interactive, it could be more engaging, and it could be good for the teachers and students. So, another perspective is, thinking back when I was 16 and 17, when I'm applying to university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, right? Do any one of you know what you wanted to do when you were 16? I think it's quite difficult. So, is there a possibility to make university subjects more accessible to help students in high school decide and, be more inspired, right? Can we make it into a game? Can we make it into a VR experience? Just like, on YouTube, where they have like a day in a life of an Oxford student studying physics, something like that. And you actually get a lot of views for that as well. And, I think it's like, how can we bridge that massive gap between universities and high schools, and also from universities to careers, right? How can we bridge that gap? So I think through visual aid, through communication, and also I think, the importance of this talk, of the series of talk, is to, not just communicate, but also through networking, through talking with people. And, the more people that you talk to, the more information you can get. And then also, when you talk to people, you can talk about your passions as well, and through that you can learn about communication, and then it's a good thing to share. So hopefully one day you can all do that for others as well, just like what I'm doing hopefully here. And so thank you very much for listening. And as a mentor for society, feel free to reach out to me anytime, and love to help out in any way possible. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alastair, for sharing all of your experiences, like the tips you've shared and what you've learned over the years. It's really incredible to see how investing and using something so simple as like visual aids can really create so much value and impact for businesses. And I personally had some questions for you as well. So maybe going back to the beginning of when you started Green Studios, like what did you think was the market opportunity, and like why did you think there would be such a demand for this service?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think like it all stems from, basically, from pitching and, listening to other people's pitches. And I feel like, there are just much better ways to showcase, the science and innovation, and we're still using such archaic forms of presentation, right? And so it was just through frustration that I really wanted to apply this to my situation, and then realizing that, there's a lot of companies that demand this as well. Through working in funds and, through my networks in funds as well, a lot of their portfolio companies don't even know this type of service existed. And, because they had really bad sort of experience talking to animation vendors where they just didn't understand the science. So it's really hard to execute on, the project itself, and they're expensive, as I mentioned, right? And so, there's no opportunity provided for earlier stage companies. And I thought that actually earlier stage companies actually need this service more than late stage companies. Because that's when they're budding out and they're trying to get more exposure, and so that's sort of where the inspiration came from. And yeah, that's sort of how I wanted to start Ren. Yeah.
Oh, I see. It's really interesting to like see how you thought the earlier stage companies, because I think I also would think maybe the larger stage companies, they'd also need it, but they probably have more money and time to talk to other, like the animation.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe could you explain a bit about maybe your job nature as the founder and managing director of Green Studios? Maybe like on a day-to-day basis, like what do you usually do?
Sure. Well, for me, I'm more sort of like focusing on demand side of things. So client facing, and as a scientist, right, I, talk to so many, different people, like different scientists and different clients, and just finding about, their innovations and other ways where we can help them, it's not just for investing, right, but it's also for their conferences, for the patients, and also physician communications, just thinking of ways, right, to strategically also to grow a company. But I think the most important thing is, and what I love about my job is, my team, right? To be able to have such a great team. So we're a team of 5 now, and we have weekly catch-up sessions, just one-on-one, because everyone is working remote. So I'm the only one in Hong Kong, 2 people in London, and 2 people in Beijing. And it's for me, it's as a manager, I think it's important to basically realize what everyone in the team, what do they strive for, right, and what are they working towards, and trying to help them achieve their goals through communication, right? So through talking to my team on a constant basis, and yeah, that's how sort of like our day-to-day works. And obviously thinking about long-term strategies for the company, I think, and that's more business side of things. But I think the most important part of my job is to bring my team up, and try to maximize their happiness, and also maximize their output. So that's what I do. Yeah.
Oh, I see. And then how are you able
Yeah.
to like, how did you find and like consolidate your team? Like, how did you find the people who were also like-minded like you to, start
Yeah.
years?
Luck. Luck plays a big part, I think, because my co-founder Anatol, I think he's also in the call, is a really good friend of mine, and we've known each other since we're 8 years old. So I went to the UK when I was 8 for boarding school, and his parents were my guardians. And so we've known each other for so long, and I known that even after Oxford, he went to Oxford as well. He was really interested in cinematography and making short movies and documentaries and stuff like that. And he's obviously very integrated into the creative space. And so when I wanted to do something for LP Science, like an animation for LP Science, I asked him, do you know how to do this? And so that was the luck part, is that you never know who you're going to meet. And so the first part from last week's talk is about networking, right? So I think that's something that was ingrained in me from the beginning of my career, and also my parents taught me, is that never say no to meeting new people. So I think that's what I've learned through this process. And my other teammates, Rosie, William, Anastasia, we met through Rosie. We met through Anatol, because he taught at UCL virtual reality and immersive films, and Rosie was one of his top students. So that was, I guess, another luck and fate thing. But Anastasia and William, we found through connections, and also through LinkedIn as well. And so that's sort of how we build up a team, and hopefully everyone has the same vision. Yeah.
I see. Maybe moving on to the lines of when you actually start creating your visuals, like throughout the process, like what are some of the key questions you always try to answer when you're creating like a visual aid for a complex scientific concept?
Yeah, we always think about, is there a way to like really simply explain something, right? Even if it's like a super complex technology, right? Is there a paragraph, where we can just explain it in one paragraph? Or is there a story or a metaphor that we can use to sort of like aid people in thinking about it? So for example, a company that we're currently working with called Ophthalmic, they are a sort of non-invasive eye drug delivery company, actually Hong Kong UST company. And they're very innovative, and in a sense that obviously they can deliver drugs without injecting it in the eye, right? And they use ultrasound as a technique to deliver drugs, which is really, ultrasound is not really a new technology in itself, but like by applying it to the eye, like how do we do that? And so I think it's just thinking about how we can simplify the visuals, how we can make it just as simple as possible. And so one of the metaphors that we thought about was, I'm not religious myself, but you remember in the Bible, Moses was crossing the ocean and he somehow split apart the ocean. And so that was the visual that we were thinking about when the ultrasound helps with pulling apart the cells. And like that's with the eye itself is very fluid and liquidy. That's sort of how we sort of imagined this whole thing, and so that's how we're applying it to the story itself. Yeah, and so that's basically what we try to do, is just finding simplification, and always having in mind like someone who has no knowledge in the science, can they understand it after they read this passage or listen to this passage? So that's basically what we firstly think about. Yeah.
Definitely, like making the science relatable to like in everyday language is what we're really helping.
Yeah.
I have some questions in the chat box from Martha. So Martha asks, how long does it take on average to create a video, like a 20-second video that would demonstrate your scientific ideas, say like a virus particle binding to a cell? Like how long does that whole animation process take?
Yeah. Well, it really depends on the scope of the project, right? So if it's 2D, then, well, if it's a virus particle, I think we'll probably use 3D. And 3D takes quite a lot of time. So on average, for a 1 minute video, I think it would take around a month to sort of deliver. Um, yeah, and it could take longer actually, depending on the creative itself, because we always think about animation as like characters, right? Like how many characters in an animation, how many models are there in an animation? So we need a model specific, like for example, like a virus particle, like how do we model it? And how do we model a cell? How do we model the 3D environment? And so that takes a lot of time to think about, and how do we frame things? So, an animation is also thinking about, like you're basically a camera, right? First person view of like the whole 3D environment. Like, so how do you determine what camera angles to use, what type of lighting, where's the light coming from, what type of textures, right? What type of colors? There's a lot of things to think about. So yeah, it could take quite a lot of time to do. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Tammy asks, for someone like if you don't have connections yourself, so how would you gather your team of like non-scientists, like the filmmakers, the 3D specialists, like who kind of also understand some of these biopharmaceutical products? Like, how do you find these people if you don't have like connections?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a lot of networks, right, that we can utilize nowadays. Like there's Vimeo, where we can share a lot of like videos that we created ourselves. There's YouTube. There are creative like sort of social media platforms that you can use, like Behance. And those are sort of like, they have like a network of creatives, right? And you can sort of find specific creative that have worked on scientific projects, right? So I think that's like another way of finding it. Yeah.
Okay. Ken asks, do you have any advice for a company who would want to bring science or medicine exhibitions to Hong Kong? Like, as you know, during this post-COVID period, the logistics and transportation is pretty expensive.
Sure. That's a very general question. I think in terms of innovation, right, like bringing people back to Hong Kong is something that, I really want, and I'm really bullish about Hong Kong as well. Given the situation in China and the relationship with the US, I think, there's actually a lot of opportunities for Hong Kong now, because, there's a lot of people from mainland who want to come to Hong Kong, set up bank accounts, increase liquidity in Hong Kong. And so we have, a lot of capital flowing. But I think the only thing missing, is, getting talents flowing back into Hong Kong. How do we do that? I feel like giving incentives. I feel like John Lee is going the right direction, right, for life sciences. At least he's giving a little bit more support. And so I think, there's a lot of opportunities and funds such as, Tiger J Pebble, where they are really focused on the Hong Kong area, and they're focused on building out tech transfers from universities in Hong Kong and CU, Hong Kong UST, right? So just encouraging professors and students to, start up this, Hong Kong startup scene again. And I feel like it's definitely possible that we can, do well in this area. Yeah.
I see. So maybe
Yeah.
Marie asks, like, who do you think are Ren's competitors right now?
That's a good question. I mean, we're always trying to be different, right, as a company. And so we don't really see ourselves as an animation studio. So I don't think animation studios would count as a competitor. There are competitors in the UK and the US that are doing, life science or healthcare animations, but they're the ones that are charging like crazy amount, in prices. And so for us, it's like, how do we price ourselves to be better, but also deliver on the quality and affordability, right? and speed as well, right? But at the same time, we don't want to be limiting ourselves as just an animation studio. And so going back to the point of, what are our goals, right? So the goals is to scale, is to create companies, is to, hopefully innovate in education. So, those are sort of the things that probably will make us unique as a company.
Okay. So maybe in terms of like when you pitch these concepts to investors, like investors in particular, what kind of information or points do you think would intrigue their interest the most? Like, or what kind of information is most relevant to investors?
To investors, I feel like the major thing is how can, they invest in you, how can they make the money back, right? I think that's the most important question that you have to answer as a company pitching to investors. And number two, I think it's like thinking about how your technology is able to carry that through, how you can execute that. Why you're unique to the competitors, right? Why are you special? And so I think these are the three main things that people want to find out, right? The other things, of course, I feel like, you can't put everything in an animation or you can't put everything in a presentation. But I think another thing that investors would like to know is how good is your team, right? How good is your team to execute something? Because ultimately for startups, you're investing in not really the technology because it's an idea, right? But can the team execute on the idea? I think that's the most important thing. Yeah.
So after being involved in the science communication industry for a while, what do you think is still missing in this industry? And like, what do you think is needed to make it more impactful?
Yeah, I think you asked, for one of the questions is like, what are we lacking in this industry? I feel like talent is not really lacking. Like, we have really strong scientists in Hong Kong. We have really strong professors, research. In terms of creatives, there's a lot of strong talent in Hong Kong as well, and the rest of the world, right? And given the technologies that we have nowadays with remote working, it's just very easy to outsource and find people. So I don't think it's a matter of talent that we're lacking, but actually we're lacking, number one, tools to, make it easy for us to do these animations, make it easy for us to do VR and productions and film and make it high quality, right? I think it's like with PowerPoint, it was so powerful because it was just so easy to use and everyone can use it and everyone can share a PowerPoint presentation very easily. So I think that's something that is lacking with these sort of new types of communication tools. Also, another thing that's missing, I feel like, is sort of the skill set of being interdisciplinary. So understanding, between the scientists and also the creatives, there isn't a lot of talents like that. And so I think, there's actually more and more people, coming up like this. And, we had an intern this year and he's studying in UT and also science, I think physiology or something, or anatomy. And he's very good at drawing and sketching as well. And so that was a really unique type of talent that, I haven't really come across. And so I think that's something that is still lacking. Yeah.
I think Emmanuel asks, where do you see Marine in 10 years?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think Ren in 10 years is we want to be able to start our own companies, to, start our own companies, not just to, as an investor, right? But to pass on sort of the knowledge of communication and tools for them to excel, into the industry and to the market. Also, I think what's really important is that we, again, mentioning tools, right? Can we create something that everyone can use to make it easier, to make it to communicate easier, right? Using these different forms and mediums. There are companies like this that are doing it not for animation specifically, but for image generation. So there's this company called DALL2, DALLE, and you can type in a sentence, right? Like a spaceship in a water bottle, and it will generate an image like that, and it's really cool. Can we apply that to a 3D environment? Can we apply that to videos in the future? I think that's a possibility. So I think in 10 years, maybe that's a stretch, but that's something that we want to do, and get some IP from doing that. Yeah.
Oh, I see. So I think there might be a few students in the audience. So what do you
Yeah.
think? Do you have any tips for students who are at university, say if they want to pursue a career in the science communication field? Like, what should they be doing to kind of kickstart their career in this industry?
Sure. I think the most important thing is, do a lot of reading and finding out actually what you're passionate about. Because I feel like, if you're not passionate about something, then you're not going to do the research. You're not going to, have the knowledge retention, and you're not going to know how to, try to share it, right? So figuring out what you really like, and being in university is something that is a place where you can explore. And I think for me, I was obviously very lucky to be doing something or studying biochemistry, and from the bat already love it. And I think I don't think that's the case for a lot of people. So I think it's important that you spend the time to read about things that you're passionate about, and then also thinking about ways to share them, right? Starting societies, joining societies that share your passions, and then through that you can start learning about communication and then networking. Yeah.
Sounds good. I think final question from Frankie. He asks, what kind of interactive elements do you think are pretty trending or will be upcoming trends in the science communication field?
Yeah, I think VR is something that is going to be very trendy, because it's interactive, and as I mentioned, right, like it's a 3D space that you can be completely immersed in. And so within education, within games, right, like it's going to be really cool, like how we can start to interact with this imaginary world. And with Web3, right, it's coming up, and I feel like it's something that is going to be the future. So can we stay ahead of this and use this and apply it to science? I definitely absolutely think we can. And so yeah, it's just a matter of having tools again, right? Having devices. We have the Meta Quest Pro from Facebook. I mean, it's expensive, it's like $1,000 US, but you can do the Oculus Quest 2, which is I think around 3,000 Hong Kong dollars or something like that, and start playing around in VR. And then, you can see sort of like what are the possibilities. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap up today's event here. So thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. And once again, huge thank you to Alastair for being here and also sharing a lot about Ren. I hope you all found today's event useful and also really rewarding by learning about some tips on how you can also be an effective science communicator. And yeah, so thank you so much for your informative talk today.